Alrighty, I'm going to go ahead and get started. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. My name is Brenna Baucum. I am a certified financial planner and founder of Collective Wealth Planning, and I specialize in serving Oregon PERS members and retirees in my practice. And I've been doing this work for almost 15 years now, and my firm itself is an independent RIA. I'm not associated with the state of Oregon in any way. Instead, I have learned everything that I know about PERS because I have had clients over these 15 years ask several questions, and then I get to do a deep dive and find things out. So if you are confused by PERS, you are not alone. It's the second most complicated pension system in the United States. And in part, that's because we have one pension system for the entire state of Oregon, whereas lots of other states have pension systems for police, fire, nurse, teachers. We just have one big one. So hopefully, this webinar will be helpful. It's really designed for those of you who are 7 to 10 years from retirement. So if you are in that phase, you're probably starting to think a little more seriously about what retirement might look like, or thinking, am I doing enough? Am I on track? What should I be thinking about now so that the future me feels really good about the choices that I make? This is all about giving you options. So before I go on, I want to do a quick check. Can you see my screen okay? I'm going to advance to the next slide. Can somebody give me like a thumbs up or a raise your hand or something like that, or chat? Cool. Great. Thanks, Abby. Okay. So I know that taking, as I just mentioned, it's a beautiful day. You could be outside. Thank you for being here with me instead. And I know taking an hour out of your day isn't always easy. So I want to start by saying thank you and framing what we're going to do together over this next hour. So here's what today is. It's educational, it's action oriented. You'll walk away with some things to do. And it's specific to the kinds of questions that I hear all the time from mid-career PERS members. My job is to really try to help to connect the dots between what you have, what's possible, what to watch out for as you move closer and closer to retirement. Today is not individual tax, investment, or legal advice. That's not what webinars are for. I'm not here to sell you anything. And what we talk about today won't be cookie cutter advice because, of course, your plan really depends on your situation. So my hope today is really help you take the next right step. So I'm going to talk about some things in detail, some things at kind of a high level. And hopefully you can leave this webinar feeling a little more grounded and clear by the time we're done. So some of you entered in some really great questions in the registration, and I saw those and I incorporated them into the slides. So I'll do my best to address them. And if we have some time at the end, I'll open it up for questions. And if we don't have time at the end, then I'm happy to hop on a call with you sometime and just answer those or talk about your specific situation. And after this, before somebody asks, our team will send out an email with the contact information for our firm with a link to the recording that we're doing right now, as well as the slide deck. So you're welcome to take notes, but know that you'll get all of this stuff too. Okay, so here's where we're heading today. So my goal is to give you this kind of simple framework to think about your financial life, one that goes beyond just logging into your accounts and hoping that it works out. So we're going to start by talking about your PERS benefits with a focus on what you have control over now. What are some of the knobs that you might be able to turn? And then we'll look for some planning transitions because I work with folks who are switching jobs or moving in and out of PERS qualifying roles, or just life transitions are happening to them. So figuring out how does that impact all of your choices. And then we'll spend some time on your outside investments. So these are the accounts you might have outside of PERS, maybe from jobs that you had before. And that's often where there's some significant room for improvement. So scattered old accounts or unclear investment strategies or missed opportunities there. And then we're going to zoom out and look at the whole plan and talk about how all these pieces connect. And at a high level, talk about income, taxes, investments, and then what it's going to feel like ultimately to live off of what you're saving for now when you move into retirement. And at the end, then I'll give you some really practical action steps of when to do them and how to do them hopefully making it crystal clear that this is applicable to your situation. So let's start with the core of your PERS benefits. So you are one of three tiers. You are either tier one, tier two, or OPSERP. And I'm guessing if you're mid-career, you might be OPSERP based on the timeline, which I have on the slide here, you can see. So some of what I'm going to say today is going to vary between tiers, and I'm going to do my best to point out what those variances are. But regardless of your tier, you have the following two elements available to you once you are a vested PERS member. You have a pension, and you have your IAP or your individual account program. So some of you may also have access to Oregon Savings Growth Plan, 457B, 403Bs, if any of these words are making sense to you. Those are other optional pieces I'll talk about in just a little bit. So let's just for now focus on these core pieces. So the pension itself is guaranteed income for you in retirement. And it is calculated based on your years of service with a PERS qualifying employer and the top 3 earning years of your salary. So you don't manage any investments here. You contribute into it, as does your employer, but you don't have any say over how it's invested. It's a defined benefit plan run by the state. And you are considered vested in this pension, meaning you've earned the right to a future income after 5 years of qualifying service. And the tier that you're in dictates the calculation used to determine your pension level. And I'm not going to go into those calculations. I have a blog on it if you're interested in learning more, but I'm hoping to keep you on the webinar a little bit longer and not put you to sleep. So your IAP is different than the pension. That's one piece. The IAP is a separate account in your name, and it's funded from either you or your employer. That varies depending on who you work for, and it's invested in the market. So that's growing and fluctuating with investment returns. And it is one of the opportunities, kind of like a medium level of opportunity to influence that you can have some influence over how this pot grows and what it's invested in. So that IAP is something that you are vested into as soon as you start to contribute to it, which is usually 6 months after you start, after your waiting period time when you're with a PERS employer. So together, the pension and the IAP, these are the beginning, the foundation of your retirement accounts with PERS. And I want to go over each of those two in just a little more detail. So let's start by thinking about the pension itself and one of the big decisions you're going to have to face at retirement, which is which of these pension options do you want to pick? So when you retire, you will choose one of either 5 or 12, depending on what tier you're in, and it's a permanent choice. And what the right choice is for you is going to depend on a number of factors. So for now, I just want to introduce kind of the general categories that PERS has. So the first option is single life, and that means you get the highest monthly amount, but payments stop when you die. So if you're single, or if you are partnered and your partner also has a pension or maybe other investments and you don't necessarily need that income beyond your lifetime, this could make sense. There are also joint and survivor options where the monthly benefit amount that you receive during your life is a little bit lower, but if your beneficiary, usually a spouse, outlives you, then they continue to receive all or a portion of that monthly income. Common choice for people who are married. And for some members, you may have lump sum options where you can take a portion or all of your benefit up front, either instead of or alongside a really reduced monthly pension amount. And I always really encourage a lot of caution if you are looking at this decision or if you're being told this is a good decision. I have a horror story of someone who came to me and a former advisor had told them, just take the lump sum out and waived a really significant solid pension for the rest of their retirement. It's painstaking to me to hear that story. And so anytime you hear lump sum, you just have some flags come up. It can be a good fit for some people, but not for all. So it's worth noting that, and like I just said earlier, tier 1 and 2 members have more payout options and more flexibility with these pensions, while OPSERP folks, they'll have fewer choices, and the benefits structured a little bit differently of the pension. So again, I'm not going to go into all the fine print today. That's something certainly you'll want to be looking at a bit more closely as you get closer to retirement, but just want you to be aware this is a one-time decision, and it's a good idea to start thinking about what might make sense for your situation. So on the scale of what you do and don't have control over, the pension is relatively low. You can't really do a whole lot of it while you're working, other than maybe advocating for pay raises, since that's what your pension is based off of. The IAP, on the other hand, we might think of this as kind of the middle road, like medium amount of control. And this is a defined contribution plan that collects roughly 6% of your earnings. And again, that's paid by either you or your employer. And you can track your balance of your IAP through the annual PERS statement that's mailed each May. Today's May 1st, so you'll be getting this this month, and to take a look at, and I'll go over it in a little more detail toward the end of the webinar. You can also log in anytime through online member services and get more up-to-date information on your IAP if you don't want to wait a whole year to get your statement. So this account is invested by default into something called a target date fund. And that is based on your birth year, and it's kind of a glide path, right? The idea is that it shifts automatically from growth-oriented stuff and investments when you are younger. And as you get closer to a retirement age, 65 is kind of the default, the investments in there automatically get more conservative the closer you get. And that might work for you. If you plan to retire at 65, that might be great. But if you plan to retire earlier, maybe you're one of the folks that's going to hit full 30 years at 55, or maybe you're going to work later, that might not be the perfect fit. So if you want to adjust it, you can do that. You can do it in September of every year. That's what they call the member choice window. You can change your investment mix at that time. In terms of contributions, if you are a high earner, which PERS identifies as over 3,000, oh, I put it on the slide, I think, 3,000, yeah, $777 a month. Senate Bill 1049 created this additional account, and you may have seen it on your annual statement. It's called the Employee Pension Stability Account. And that takes a part of that 6% contribution and puts it into this separate account to shore up and make sure that you can earn your pension, that your pension is solid by the time you get there. So if you earn over that $3,770 a month and you're tier 1, 2, that means rather than the full 6% going to your IAP, 3.5 goes there. The other 2.5 goes into that EPSA account. OPSERP members, you are contributing 5.25% is going into the IAP, and 0.75 is going into the EPSA. And if you're hearing this and you're thinking, that's not fair, this is supposed to be going into my account and I should be getting the pension anyway, it is a good thing, in my opinion, in the long term, to make sure that we have a solid pension system. And Oregon's pension system generally is one of the most solid. It's pretty well funded compared to other state pension programs. I know there's a lot about it in the news right now, and a lot of changes, like you're seeing these different tiers and these different ways in which the pension program is trying to solidify and make sure that they're solvent long beyond. But I will say that the Oregon Supreme Court has guaranteed you the right to this pension. So if other changes come and reduce, and there's a fourth tier added later, that shouldn't impact you and your tier, right? Okay, that was a little tangent for you. So at retirement, this account, this IAP account, it functions a lot like any other IRA you might have. So withdrawals are designed for those of you, once you get to 59 and a half, if you take anything earlier than that, a 10% penalty applies, just like all retirement accounts. And any withdrawals you take out of it are taxed at ordinary income, just like your paycheck is right now. So PERS is going to give you some options when you go to retire, and the retirement packet has options of how you want to take out your IAP. They give you some choices of installments or timing or that kind of thing. But what I see in practice is most folks say, I'm just going to roll this over into an IRA, and then I'll decide when I'm in retirement how to take those distributions out. Okay, so now we'll move. So if that IAP is the medium level of control that you have, then this is the high level of control of options that PERS gives you to have some additional retirement savings long term. So some of you have options to contribute to a 403B or 457B. And 403B plans, I typically see those offered through schools and hospitals. And 457B plans are ones through state jobs. And the big difference between those two is that a 403B plan, excuse me, a 457B plan gives you the ability to have access to these funds before 59 and a half without a 10% penalty. So I just made reference earlier to if you're at 30 years at 55 and that's considered full retirement for you, you might need these funds between 55 and 59 and a half. And so if you have a choice, putting it in the 457B might give you some access to those funds early on. The plans themselves, regardless of which letters numbers that they are, typically offer a traditional plan in all. Most also offer a Roth option. So the thoughts around how to make decisions there, traditional, that's pre-tax money, that's growing tax deferred. When you take it out, it's ordinary income in retirement. Roth money, that's going in after tax, so you're not saving taxes today, but it's growing tax deferred, and then qualified distributions are tax-free. So just like with any other retirement savings decision, whether or not to contribute to these or whether or not to use the Roth versus the traditional option, it's all part of broader tax planning and balancing. And you want to be thoughtful about whether you're saving taxes today, it might mean higher taxes in retirement. And I see this a lot with PERS folks because you have your pension, you have your IAP money, which is taxable at 100%. You'll have Social Security, which is mostly taxable. And so having in this other stream of income, having a little tax flexibility can be pretty nice. So you don't always move into a lower tax bracket in retirement. That used to be the rule of thumb, but it's not always true. Contribution limits I added on here. So some of you, if you have access to a 403B and a 457B, you can really front load the retirement savings that you're doing. But assuming you don't have that much discretionary income, here's the limits I put here on the slide of what you can contribute each year. And one of the last options you can think about exploring to, again, shore up that retirement nesting, you can, if you want to, restore the full IAP contribution amount. So we just talked about that EPSA and how you have a small percentage moved into that pension stability fund. This IAP makeup gives you an opportunity to make after-tax contributions to the IAP that are in an amount equal to what's being redirected. So again, for tier 1, 2, 2.5%, for OPSER, 0.75%. And these voluntary contributions, they go into the same target retirement date fund as your regular IAP money. And the question I had about this when I first learned about it, I said, well, okay, if we are saving on a pre-tax basis, making contributions into the IAP on a pre-tax basis, but we're doing this IAP makeup with after-tax dollars, what happens to the difference? We're not going to get taxed twice, are we? So I called PERS, which is great, by the way. I don't know if you've ever called their number before. Sometimes the wait times can be awful, but they do have a callback option. You can put in your phone number. And they are always very helpful. And so the woman on the phone told me that the contributions themselves at retirement are returned to you as after-tax dollars, and the earnings on the IAP makeup contributions are considered pre-tax and become a part of the IAP pool, taxed at ordinary income as they come out. So it's kind of a hybrid bit of treatment there. I have yet to have a client retire who's been doing this because it's a relatively new program. I'm going to have one this fall. And I'm going to test this and see and make sure that what the woman told me on the phone is correct. So that's how the IAP makeup works. So that's kind of the first phase of our talk is giving you kind of a high level overview of just what are those core benefits associated with PERS and what are your options. Now I want to move into transition planning. So I'll start by what happens if you decide to leave a PERS participating employer and how to navigate that. So first, I think it's really important to know that PERS is portable. So I just said at the beginning of this webinar, we're one of the most complex pension systems in the country because we have one. That the con is that it's complex. The pro, it means that we have over 900 public employers in Oregon. So if you're moving from one public agency into another, your membership continues uninterrupted as long as you stay in a PERS employer. And if you don't, if you're moving out, if there is any chance that you might return to public service and you are far off from retirement still or mid-career, it's best to leave your PERS benefits in place. So as long as you are vested, then your tier is locked in and your IAP remains invested. The pension will just kind of pause for the time that you're away, but it doesn't disappear. So that flexibility can really work in your favor if you ever come back. You're not writing off that benefit. I've met with a couple of people who left as tier 1 or 2 because they didn't think they were coming back, closed out their file, went back to public work several years later and had to re-enter as OPSERT, and they are not thrilled with that decision. The next thing I want to talk about is if you want to retire fully from Oregon PERS. So there's a lot of nuance to what PERS means when they say that you're eligible for retirement, and I've tried to summarize it here on this slide. So normal retirement, what they call normal retirement, means that your pension benefits are not reduced. You're getting the highest amount that you can. Early retirement means that you can retire and start drawing a benefit, but it's going to be actuarially reduced since you're claiming before the normal retirement age or years of service. And that can be a real trade-off, right, between the freedom of retirement and receiving a smaller monthly benefit. Just like with all of this, there's not really a one-size answer here, but I think it's important to remember that this benefit that you get, this pension benefit you get, is for life, and so is the reduction if you retire early. So really broadly speaking, if you retire 3 years early, that can reduce your benefit by about 23%. If you retire 5 years early, that can reduce your benefit by about 35%. So that's nothing to sneeze at when you think about that applied for the rest of your life. I think another really big consideration that I see a lot and that I help client families with is health insurance. So if you're leaving public service before 65 and you don't have some continuation of healthcare coverage through your former employer, you're going to need to find a plan to bridge the gap before Medicare kicks in. And this can be a pretty big budget item. So it's something to think about early. You're going to have some options through PIP and PEB. Now PEB just started offering also retirement options in addition to your healthcare coverage while you're working. Of course, the healthcare exchange in Oregon would be another one you could look to for coverage. And kind of the average premiums I've seen have been about $1,000 a month for people in this phase where they're looking at retirement early. And that, of course, varies quite a bit depending on what kind of coverage you want. All right. So that's what retirement looks like. That's how PERS defines retirement. And there are some people who say, well, yeah, I want to retire and I want to start collecting my pension once I'm considered either full or maybe even early retirement, but then I want to go back and start working again. So let's take a look at what that looks like. If you work for a non-PERS employer, none of this applies, right? You can go and work that however long, your pension will not be affected. There were some changes recently that Senate Bill 1049 made this a lot more flexible for you. So as of January 1st, 2020, and it continues through 2034, most PERS retirees are allowed to work an unlimited number of hours for a PERS employer without impacting their retirement benefits. And that flexibility makes a phased-in retirement or part-time work a heck of a lot more accessible, which is great to know. Right now, when you're in this kind of midpoint in your career, if you want to plan kind of a slow phase out, it doesn't have to be a hard stop. So a couple of points about this. You're going to continue to receive your pension, but you're not going to earn any additional service credit. So once you've said, PERS, I'm fully retired, you've separated from service, you've rolled over your IAP, you don't have a service record to continue to grow, right? So there's that. And then, of course, no IAP in there to make contributions to. And there are a few nuances here, again, around what PERS considers normal retirement versus early retirement. So if you retire at the normal retirement age, you can go back to work right away and work as many hours as you want to. If you retire early, you can only work unlimited hours if you take a 6-month break before returning to PERS employment. Otherwise, you're subject to some annual limits, which I put on the page here. So thinking about that, the consequences if you exceed those limits are that your retirement benefits can stop, that pension. And in some cases, you might have to pay the pension payments back if whatever you received that's over that limit within that time. So it gets kind of messy. The last thing I wanted to say here is like, this is PERS rule. They say this Senate bill said, yes, this is what we say, but it's very individualized employer to employer. So even though PERS allows it, the employer might have some additional restrictions about exactly how to coordinate this. So making sure you check in on those details would be important. All right, so the last transition piece I want to talk about is just life transitions, right? They can pretty significantly impact your PERS benefits and your overall financial plan, of course. And of all of these, when I started to put this slide together, I thought, well, every single one of these, updating beneficiary designations is important, right? So whether it's for your pension, your IAP, your 457 or 403B accounts, keeping your beneficiary designations current, make sure that your intentions are honored and that there's no surprises or complications later. Another life transition you might face is divorce, and it's important to understand how PERS benefits might be divided. So Oregon uses something called the Division of Benefits Order, or a DBOD, which is a bad acronym because it doesn't quite work. It should be a DBO, but to DBOD. So this assigns a portion of your pension and or your IAP to your former spouse. And the specific terms of that division, of course, are coordinated with your legal team and making sure that it aligns with the rest of the plan and the division of assets. And I think it's important to note the DBOD, it's different than the Quadro, the Qualified Domestics Relations Order that your attorney might be putting together. So making sure that you're crystal clear with your attorney on, here are the various elements of my plan. This is my defined benefit. This is my defined contribution plan. That way they know what to apply and where, and make sure it's all factored in appropriately and everybody is fair and square and there's no pushback on any of that. In the case of widowhood, taking a close look at surviving spouse income. So if you've lost a partner who's contributing to the household financially, it might make sense to revisit the savings rate or adjusting the timeline based on reduced survivorship income. And on the flip side, a marriage, especially later in your career, might bring some shared opportunities. So I think it's important to be clear about how retirement income is going to be shared, because oftentimes I meet with clients who partner later in life, and sometimes finances are completely separate. So having money conversations before you get married, very important. Figuring out whether or not that income is going to be pooled, figuring out whether or not it's going to impact. Do you want a joint survivorship option, or are you going to stick with a single life to get the higher benefit? All these critical conversations to have in advance, and certainly part of where a prenup could be helpful. The last piece I wanted to talk about is disability. So if you experience a disability, your eligibility for PERS disability benefits depends on the membership type and your years of service. Of course, beyond that, it's really essential to review what are the long-term financial implications around income replacement, health coverage, future retirement benefits, all that. So these types of transition, all of them can be pretty emotionally intense, but with some thoughtful planning, hopefully you can help reduce some of the financial stress and stay grounded. All right, Let's move on to talking about outside investment accounts. So, especially as you start thinking more seriously about retirement and the long term and really getting your ducks in a row, this is an important piece. So, these three areas are the top ones where I often see opportunities for clients to align what they have going on inside PERS with the rest of their financial plan. So, first up, orphaned accounts. They're sad and lonely, just like this little guy on the bench. They're all alone. And they might be 401ks from other retirement plans that you have had outside of PERS, and they can be easy to forget about. And I think people think, I'll clean that up later. Might be feel harmless to have it lay out there. It can complicate your overall investment picture if they're not reviewed or factored into the other pieces that you have. So I had one client come to me with 13 different 401k accounts from different employers that she had. And it took a while to get that all cleaned up. But once we did, she got to see, which is kind of on to the next point, that the overall investment allocation for these accounts was not in alignment with her risk tolerance. So if you set up an old account, an old retirement account when you were in your 20s, your ability to handle market volatility and your time horizon for needing those funds was pretty different, probably, than it is today when you're in mid-career. So in this phase, it's critical to make sure that that investment risk actually reflects your horizon to retirement, your time horizon, the goals that you have once you get there, and what the timeline's going to be. So that means not just reviewing how aggressive the portfolio is, but also making sure, again, how does it fit in with the entire financial picture, including what you have from PERS. And the last piece that we see sometimes is duplicate holdings. So when we have accounts in different places, there are multiple holdings with the same mutual fund, the same ETFs, and this can lead to some overexposure in certain sectors or asset classes, and may mean a little less diversification than you think you have. So some of the possible action steps, if any of this describes you, if you have some sad, lonely accounts, consolidating those accounts to simplify the management and improve your awareness of what they're doing and the role that they play. Roth conversions while you're still working could be a possible thing to explore. Again, it's not always true that we're in a lower tax bracket in retirement. So thinking through the right timing around that, or maybe even Roth conversions in the time between retirement and Social Security. That's a popular thing for talking through with a lot of my clients. And then positioning your accounts for long-term tax efficiency. That can make a really big difference in how much income you can safely draw on later and what the tax liability of it is. And it might be conversions, like I just said. It might be saving some money in an after-tax account to have diversification of tax liability in retirement or to pay for those conversions, maybe. So those are some of the things that you have a choice over now. I often say to folks who come to me around this phase of their career, it's a heck of a lot easier for us to steer the ship now. You just kind of got to slowly move the wheel a little, as opposed to cranking it when you're just a year or two out from retirement. So the goal of this and the point of this slide is not just to clean up the financial closet, but to ensure that all your accounts are working toward the same goal, that they're rowing in the same direction. So as we start to bring all these pieces together, I want to zoom out and talk about the plan itself. So this is where this comes really into focus, I think. So at the heart of your retirement plan is your future income, and it's likely coming from, like I said, PERS pension, IAP distributions, maybe some of your other defined contribution accounts, eventually Social Security. And it's very hard. Those are all happening in different silos, and it's really hard to figure out how all those pieces work together to meet your needs unless you have a financial plan that does exactly that. Because that income I just mentioned, I guess that is part of the puzzle. Replacing your paycheck is part of the puzzle. But it also, a good plan also accounts for your taxes and cash flow and inflation, your goals, what you want to do, traveling, giving, leaving a legacy. Those are common ones that I hear. Each of these elements really plays a role, and how you coordinate them can make a difference in, your peace of mind of how you feel, but also the long-term sustainability of your plan. So those are some of them, but then financial planning is huge. You zoom out, and we're talking about making sure your estate plan is in alignment with all this, your insurance coverage, your overall investment strategy is evolving alongside the income and all of the really practical changes. So one of the biggest takeaways here is that as you're building your plan and as you're thinking through these things, your decisions, you really want to be giving yourself flexibility and options, not just projections, which is part of the financial planning process, but you really want it to be something that you can kind of live with. And that's maybe another big point, is that this is not a financial planning itself is not a one and done. It's this evolving process and tool that should grow with you, because our lives aren't static. Our goals shift, our family changes, our career takes shifts and turns, and your financial plan should be adaptable and grow alongside you. So that's kind of what I meant by what I wrote here of like a living plan mindset. And lately, I've been having lots of conversations with people about a resilient financial plan, building one that gives you options. Again, not about figuring out everything today, because it's not going to go, it's always my guarantee to folks, like, we're going to put together a great plan and it's going to not go exactly this way, because it's just not how life works. So making some thoughtful and strategic moves to set up your future with some flexibility and, again, choices, options. So that's the kind of planning that you want to aim for as your target, right? Not rigid or overwhelming, but something that's responsive and intentional and ideally pretty personal. All right, so now here are your 6 action items. Again, you're going to get this slide deck, but if you have a piece of paper and you want to pull it out and write these things down, you certainly can. So the first one is very simple, but powerful. Review the statement that shows up later this month, right? It's more than just a form letter. It is a snapshot of your PERS progress so far. So it shows the pool of money that your pension is going into and the contributions going into it. That does not tell you how much your pension is going to be, by the way. That's not what this form is for, but it will show you what the overall pool is. It'll tell you about your years of service and whether or not you're currently vested. And it will outline your retirement eligibility date, which we talked about earlier, applies and influences a lot of things. It includes the IAP balance along with the current investment strategy. So you can kind of see what is the target retirement date fund selected. And for those of you who are subject to that EPSA redirect I talked about, it has some details about how much is going in there each year. So this is just something to do once a year. And because PERS mails this to you in the mail, that's a great opportunity to do it. So if anything doesn't look right as you're reviewing it, especially your service time or your eligibility date, that is worth following up with sooner than later. So this I think is the foundation of your retirement benefits. So we want to make sure it's accurate and working in your favor. If when you get this later this month, you say, what does this mean again? What was Brenna even talking about? I have a video and a blog for that. So I will, because of the timeliness of it, I will actually link to that in the follow-up notes that I'll email you all just so you have it handy for walking through this. Okay, second action item for you is to review those defined contribution accounts you have. So the 403B, the 457B statements, check those out quarterly. That's when they send them. Again, you'll get an email probably. Voya is a big custodian that a lot of providers here in Oregon use. So these statements help provide you with some information about how your retirement savings is going outside of PERS, how they're performing, just checking in generally on which buckets too. So if you pick a Roth and a traditional, maybe you're doing 50-50 into each bucket, this can tell you how those are growing. I think it's pretty critical to understand that future, not only the growth part of it, but also, again, the tax consequences once you get to retirement. And I think it can be a good reminder of reassessing that investment strategy. So you don't end up like the other people I was talking about with a retirement account that's all in stocks when you're 1 year from retirement. And then we have a year like this year that can be very painful. So making sure, does this mix of stocks and bonds or other investments, does it still make sense given your time horizon, your risk tolerance? As you move closer to retirement, you might want to adjust that gradually. And checking beneficiary designations, right? So life changes, your account should make sure that those are up to date as well. And I keep saying beneficiary designations. I'm pretty sure it's on this one too, because I have had people come to me and just appalled that their ex-husband or wife was still a beneficiary on their accounts and they'd been divorced for years. So that's something that's easy to forget to update. So don't forget. So the third action item here is check in on that IAP. So that is part of the overall retirement income, right? It's going to be part of your goals and long term. So every September, like I said, that's that member choice window where you have an opportunity to get in there, change your investment strategy if you want to. And that means you can adjust how your IAP dollars are allocated, or if you want to stay in the default one. Just again, all of these are really just increasing your awareness of what you have and making sure that you're staying friends. I have one client who said she wants to make friends with her money. So make friends with your money, make friends with the accounts you have, and stay up to date on them. So this is a once a year check-in in terms of the investment rationale there. Fourth action item, pull informal pension estimates. So the good news is you can do this anytime through your online member services account. Just remember it's a different login than the IAP online member account. If you Google that, PERS will point you in the right direction, but they're two different logins that you have. So pulling an estimate gives you a pretty high level idea of what a monthly pension benefit looks like based on current earnings. So it's saying here, if your earnings are as they are today, what does your retirement benefit look like? So it's not a formal quote, but it can certainly be helpful for expectation setting and just kind of preliminary planning purposes. I think of these informal estimates as a measuring stick. So something that we can kind of say, okay, what is our informal benefit saying this year as we're tracking progress throughout your career and just kind of checking in and again, making sure, oh, okay, now I'm at this many years of service. My salary is now at this. How does that impact my future pension? So I think this can help you make some more informed decisions today. Like, well, maybe I want to adjust my savings rate, right? Or maybe I'm thinking differently about my retirement date, or if nothing else, just feeling more confident about what you're going to have when you get there. The fifth action item is to, rather than an informal benefit estimate, is to request a formal benefit estimate. But the timing here matters. So you can only request a formal estimate when you're within 2 years of your retirement eligibility date. So we talked earlier about the various ways that PERS identifies retirement eligibility based on your tier. So these formal benefit estimates are really pretty different than the informal ones you get, because the formal estimate and requesting it, even if you don't intend to retire within 2 years of retirement eligibility, requesting this gives PERS the opportunity to update your file. So if there are any discrepancies, missing service time, incorrect salary history, and PERS is always saying, like, if your name and birth date and address are wrong, right? So if you see any errors on this running this request early can help and catch those and gives you a time to clean that up long before retirement. So I think that whole process, retiring with PERS, going through their application, it's a lot of steps, and it all goes so much more smoothly when your file is cleaned up and accurate ahead of time. Alrighty, the final action item, and maybe one of the most important, is figuring out how to put all of these pieces together. So it's one thing to review each of the accounts that we just talked about, right? These 5 action items and any of these decisions in isolation, like how should this be invested versus that. But the feeling of real financial security comes again when you can see how all these pieces work together. And I think having a plan helps you get something concrete to build toward, and it gives you the confidence that decisions that you're making today are building towards something, setting you up for success in the future. and maybe most importantly, gives you hope on the days you need it most, because you know that the seeds that you've planted are growing, even if you aren't seeing all the results yet. So if you're a do-it-yourselfer, tools like Bolden, used to be called New Retirement, can be a really great starting point to model out different retirement scenarios and start to connect some of the dots. Smart Asset is another one online that's a free calculator. They have all sorts of tools and things you can use. But before you make any long-term decisions, certainly any long-term irreversible decisions about retirement, I would be remiss not to suggest you sit down with a professional, somebody who can look across your whole financial life, bring all these things together, help you spot some of the things that you might not see on your own. And that's going to bring me to my very last point, which is finding the right thought partner for you on this journey. So, PERS, when you go to a PERS webinar, you will often hear people say, this is not investment advice. This is not, specific for you. This is really broad. And that's right. They're not investment advisors. They're not CFPs. They should be broad in their language. So when you're looking for a financial advisor, I suggest looking for a thought partner and filtering them by structure that they have, the studies they have, and the skills that they bring to the table. So the CFP, or Certified Financial Planner credentials, are a pretty great starting point. It took me 3 months to call myself a investment advisor, and it took me 3 years to call myself a CFP, because there's 6,000 hours of client-facing work required. There's a rigorous study program. There's a low pass exam rate. So all of these things can signal a commitment to more professionalism, education, ethics, those kind of things. And you want to find somebody who can match your specific needs. So whether that's expertise in tax planning, retirement income strategies, PERS, investment management, finding somebody who does that, making sure that they offer a structure, a fee structure and a service structure that works for you. So that might be hourly planning, it might be project-based planning, might be ongoing. Location matters a little bit less than it used to. A lot of advisors work virtually, but finding somebody who meets you when and how you need to meet is important. And then beyond credentials and expertise, I suggest looking for somebody with strong active listening skills and a really collaborative approach. You really want to work with somebody who's not just going to talk at you, but will work with you. And I think that at the end of the day, the right advisor should feel like an extension of your own planning efforts, right? You're walking away from this webinar with more information than you had at the start. Now you can take this in and say, all right, help me continue to put these pieces together and build this puzzle out. All right, that's it. Thank you so much for your time and your attention. If there are any questions, it looks like we have about 10 minutes left. I'm happy to take them. While I wait for you to chat those in, if you have any, I will share that I'm very happy to hop on a phone call with any one of you. I know money can be a taboo topic and maybe not very comfortable to ask questions in front of an audience you don't know the size of. So if that's you, I will include the contact information for our office. So you're welcome to give a call sometime. You can sit down, happy to take a look at your situation and answer questions if I can. All right, I have one question here. How to decide Roth versus traditional contributions? Okay, so great question. And there's people on both sides of the spectrum answering this question. Some people think you should definitely do all Roth because tax rates historically are pretty darn low right now. So pay today's tax rates, always pay the lowest tax rate, and then down the line, that tax deferred growth is going to pay in dividends for you because you won't have to pay taxes long term. So the sooner you can have Roth money growing, the better. If you're still 7-10 years from retirement, time's on your side. So there's that argument. The other side of it is that you have higher tax liability today. and sometimes that hurts. So if you're worried about whether or not Roths are going to be taxed in the future or those kind of things, you could consider splitting the difference, doing some in a Roth and some in a traditional IRA. I have several clients who have chosen to do that. Is there any benefit to work more than the full retirement credit years? Great question. So if you have, um, think you are going to have a higher salary in years 31, 2, and 3, typically people retire in their highest salary years, that will increase the payout of your pension and how your pension is calculated. Because remember, it's based on your highest 3 earnings years. Even if those highest 3 earning years are on the tail end of your time with PERS. So that would be one benefit. The other would be continued contributions into your IAP that continue to grow. An alternative could be, like we talked about before, you could retire at 30 years, collect that pension, and then go back and work, again, depending on what tier you're in and all of those details. So yeah, there's a few different options there. I think before you make, that would be a great question to run by an advisor before you make that decision, because again, once you separate from service with PERS, your file is closed in terms of being able to continue to contribute to the pension pool. Great question. One other question here around lump sum payments. So what are the pension itself? What are the pros and cons of lump sum payments? So lump sum payments, the pros would be that you get a big hunk of money at retirement. Typically, people would choose to, if they take a lump sum, roll that over into a pre-tax account, because that big chunk, if you take it as cash, will be taxable 100%. And that's a painful thing to have happen in any one year. So that's, I guess, the pro is you can choose your investment strategy however you want for what that money's doing. But the cons is that for the most part, you are significantly reducing that guaranteed lifetime pension. And guaranteed is one of those words in finance that we're not supposed to use very often because it's rarely true. But a pension through Oregon PERS is guaranteed. And I think it's important to think about what you're giving up, because if the stock market crashes and you have a lump sum that's invested, that amount goes down. Your ability to draw on that account without impacting long-term growth is impacted in a way that's really different than if you have turned on a pension piece. So I do have a whole blog about that and a video I wrote about the lump sum options. If that's something that is more of interest to you, you can find it on my website, but also if you can't find it, shoot me an email. I'll happy to help. All right, one other question I see here is around how reliable are informal benefit estimates? Well, they're better than nothing. They're better than nothing. They're good to use early in the planning work. There are some kind of back of the napkin calculations you can make around what your pension benefit might be. They are also based on today's salary, which is how the informal benefit estimates are based as well. You don't really have an option to say, well, what if I'm making 75,000 today, but at retire, my highest 3 years are more like 125,000. There's not quite that level of detail available yet on the OMS website. So I would say if you're doing some planning work, these are better than nothing. But again, as soon as you have the ability to get a formal benefit estimate, really encourage you to do that just for all the reasons I mentioned earlier. All righty. That's all I see in here for questions. Again, want to just thank you all so much for your time and your attention again on this gorgeous May Day, and wish you all the best. Happy to serve as a resource for you however I can. Feel free to reach out and we'll talk soon. All right. Thanks, everybody.